Hello everyone, in this chapter we will talk about elasticity. And elasticity is an important concept because it helps us to understand how responsiveness our customers to a change in price, and not only the price, because demand has several different determinants, and we will understand how responsive consumers to a change in each determinant. So when I say responsiveness, for instance, if we are thinking about the price increase, when the price changes because of law of demand, we know that when the price increases, quantity demanded should go down. But we don't know how much the change in quantity demanded. So when the price rises, are they decreasing the quantity demanded too much or too little? So that's the elasticity. If it's too little, they are not sensitive to price, then it's called inelastic. And if they change the quantity too much, it's called elastic. So this is the price elasticity. Then we will learn about the relation between total revenue and elasticity. And then we talk about determinants of price, elasticity of demand, and we talk about price elasticity of supply. And finally, we will learn other elasticities based on other goods in the market and the consumer's income. So, price elasticity of demand measures buyers' responsiveness to price changes. In an elastic demand, consumers are sensitive to price changes. This is the key. They are sensitive to price changes, so there is a huge change in quantity demanded. Remember again, there is this inverse relation between price and quantity demanded. Okay, if the response is too large, it is elastic demand. If the response is too little, it's inelastic demand. So we have made during the seminars several examples. One of them was insulin. And insulin demand was inelastic because consumers are insensitive to price changes. They have to get their pill, and therefore this causes small change in quantity demanded. So what is the formula for price elasticity? ED is percentage change in quantity demanded. I use this math symbols, percentage change, delta is change, quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. And in order to find these percentage changes, price and percentage change in quantity, we use the midpoint formula. So what is midpoint formula? Here is this one. This is change in quantity divided by sum of quantities over 2. So when we are going to use this formula, we will use this when we have points rather than percentage changes in price or quantity. So you might have, for instance, price is $10, demand is 100, and the price doubles, demand 50. So as you see, this is P1, this is P2, this is Q1, this is Q2. So if we have points, then we need to calculate percentage change in price, and we need to calculate percentage change in quantity, and we are going to use this formula to calculate each of them. So we use percentages in calculation of price elasticity of demand. That means it's unit-free measure, because if you have percentages here, let's calculate elasticity given two fictitious numbers. Like for instance, price increased by 10%, this is the change in price, and quantity changes by 20%. So prices increase by 10% and quantity demanded decreases by 20%. So if I want to calculate the elasticity, I'll take this number first, which is 20%, and then divide with this number, which is 10%. So we will find a number such as 2. It's unit-free, okay? And this helps us compare the elasticities across products. So if you realize here, I said that when price increases, quantity demanded decreases. When it's a decrease in a number, we use a negative sign. So quantity demanded decreases by 20%, and the result should be -2. But for price elasticity of demand, we do not pay attention to the negative sign. We look at the magnitude of that number, which is the absolute value of -2, which is 2. And now we can actually understand whether the good is elastic or inelastic. So the next question is, how do we understand depending on the number we find? We have the threshold of 1. If elasticity number you find greater than 1, demand is elastic. If it's less than 1, demand is inelastic. If it's equal to 1, demand is unit elastic. And we have extreme cases too. if, for instance, elasticity is 0, demand is perfectly inelastic. So what does that mean? Whatever the price or how much the price increases, you do not change the amount you buy. That's perfectly inelastic. And in case of perfectly elastic, elasticity is infinite, and that means if price even changes little bit, you don't buy at all. So that's the idea of perfect elasticity and perfectly inelastic. Here is the demand curve when the product is perfectly inelastic, and we know that the demand curve is downward sloping, but for special cases like perfectly inelastic, demand curve is vertical at the quantity. Let's say it's 2 pills a day, and let's assume that this is the insulin pill and this is the price of insulin. And if the price increases, let's say from $30 to this $50, you see, you are still consuming 2 pills a day. As you see, this is a case of perfectly inelastic demand. Now let's look at perfectly elastic demand. Here, this could be an example of very identical products, like farmers selling rice. All farmers are selling exactly the same rice, and they are located very close to each other. So even the price changes, let's say rice they sell is $2 a pound, and if the price increases even 5 cents, $2.5, nobody's buying from that farmer because they can buy the same rice from next door. Okay, so that's a case of perfectly elastic, and at that $2, the quantity is infinite, as you see. You can buy any amount here, 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 doesn't matter. So the next thing we need to discuss is the relation between total revenue and elasticity. And for your information, total revenue is the same as total sales for a business. So price times quantity. Let's say you're selling 10 shirts a day and each are $20. Then your total sales or total revenue per day is going to be $200. That's the total revenue. So one thing we need to know is that there is a relation between total revenue and elasticity. So in elastic demand, P and total revenue move in opposite directions. So what does that mean? That means if you have an elastic demand, let's think about an elastic demand, furnitures, cars, right? You have different types of models of cars. And if you want to increase the revenue, sales for these type of businesses, the goal should be to decrease the price. So how you can decrease the price? Discounts. Like if you realize before the Labor Day or Memorial Day or Christmas time, you see lots of commercials on discounts on cars, furnitures, and so on. The reason is because when you decrease the price, have a discount, quantity demanded increases much, much more. As I said, because elastic demand is very sensitive to price changes. And when you multiply these two, this positive one, which is an increase, dominates, therefore total revenue increases as well. Okay, so the goal, if you have an elastic demand for your product, the goal should be to have discounts to increase the total revenue or total sales. So this is the idea of sell cheap, sell more. But for inelastic demand, you should follow a different or the opposite strategy. Again, for the elastic demand, this is the price, this is quantity demanded, and their multiplication is total revenue. And here we need to increase the price. Why? Because they are moving, P and T are moving the same direction. So if you increase the price, you are going to lose little bit from the quantity. The lose part is negative, increased price is positive, but positive side is much larger, therefore total revenue at the end increases. The reason is that because when you increase the price little bit, you are not going to lose too many customers, therefore total sales are going to increase. So depending on the elasticity, your pricing strategy should be different. If it's an elastic demand, you need to have discounts to increase the total sales, because with the discount, you will sell more. And if you have an inelastic demand, it should be the reverse. By increasing the price, you're not going to lose too many customers. Therefore, total revenue increases. In unit elastic demand, total revenue doesn't change when P changes. So you can check how total revenue and elasticity can be seen on a demand. So this demand, as you see, is flat. Flatter the demand curve, the more elastic it is. It's an elastic demand. So let's say the price is $2. When the price is $2, this is the total revenue, right? You have 2 times 10, which is 20. This area is the total revenue. Because if you remember, total revenue is price times quantity. And when you drop the price to $1, look how much quantity gain you have. And now the new total revenue is going to be again price times quantity, but it is 40. Why? It's $1 times 40 units. So as you see, total revenue increases in an elastic demand when you decrease the price. Let's check inelastic demand. In elastic demand, the demand curve is steeper, like this one. Compared to the previous one, this is steeper. Now you have $4 and you have $1. So we need to actually increase the price in an inelastic demand. But let's assume we don't know this rule and we decrease the price. So let's start with $4. If the product is $4, you sell 10. So this area, 4 times 10, $40. The yellow rectangular is the revenue. When you decrease the price to $1, this area is the revenue, which is $20. So you follow the wrong strategy by decreasing the price because you are lowering the total sales. So it should be the reverse. You should increase the price to gain more sales. And here is the unit elastic demand. You will realize that you can do on your own. 3 times 10 is 30. If you change the price 1 times 30, 30. So the total revenue doesn't change in a unit elastic demand. You can also check this example from your textbook, how in fact total revenue changes depending on the elasticity of the product. So let's summarize price elasticity greater than 1. The demand is elastic or relatively elastic. Quantity demanded changes by a large percentage than does price, and impact on total revenue. If the price increases, total revenue decreases. If the price decreases, total revenue increases. That's why we have a lot of discounts and commercials focusing on this type of goods. Equal to 1 unit or unitary elastic, quantity demanded changes by the same percentage as does the price. Total revenue is unchanged whether the price increases or decreases. Less than 1 elasticity, it's inelastic or relatively inelastic. Quantity demanded changes by a smaller percentage than does price. Total revenue increases when the price increases, and when the price decreases, total revenue decreases. A good example is oil, gasoline, or insulin pills. So what are the determinants of elasticity? The main determinant is substitutability. So if you have more substitutes, demand is more elastic. And another determinant that I have not mentioned in the seminar is proportion of income. Higher proportion of income, demand is more elastic because a change in the price affects a lot to your purchasing power. Another one is luxuries versus necessities. Luxury goods demand is more elastic, and also time is detrimental here. If you have more time, then you have more substitutes, therefore demand is more elastic, but in the short run, demand is more inelastic because you cannot find alternatives easily in the short run. So we have selected price elasticities of demand. Newspapers, interesting. It's very low elasticity, but I don't think it's relevant nowadays because we know that actually we have online resources to read news. Electricity, yes, it makes sense. You need it, right? It's very inelastic. Bread, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Major League Baseball tickets seems like very inelastic. People go to the baseball games whether the prices are increasing or not. Cigarettes, because of addiction. Telephone services, it's indispensable in this life. Sugar, it seems like inelastic too. Medical care is inelastic. Eggs, inelastic, and so on. Let's check the elastic ones. Lamp, restaurant meals, residential land, china, glassware, tableware, which makes sense. So let's see one example of the application of price elasticity, and we are going to talk about crops. For crops, let's assume there is a market price, right? This could be rice, for instance, and this is supply. And usually for crops, demand is inelastic. That's why I have a steep curve here. and their intersection determines the market price. But let's assume for that year we have large crop. That means the season is good, and therefore supply of the crops are increasing. This is the new supply curve, and because of abundance of crops, the prices of, as you see, rice is going down. Let's say this is $5, now it's $2. Since demand is inelastic, the lower price leads to lower revenue for farmers, right? Why? Because before they were getting this area 5 times this quantity. But since demand is inelastic, you see revenue, total sales are going down. Why? Because remember, inelastic good, when the prices go down, total revenue goes down as well. And farmers are worse off when there is a large crop yield. So when government wants to impose taxes on goods, it's important for them to understand the elasticity of demand for the good. If they place a tax on a good with an inelastic demand, the higher price won't decrease the quantity purchased. Why? Because people are, for instance, cigarettes, right? You impose a tax on cigarette, but people will continue to buy cigarette, and thereby increasing the amount of tax revenue that government collects. So there are two ways of looking at this societal problem, but as you see with elasticity we can explain in 2 different ways. And remember that the demand for these illegal drugs are inelastic. So when it becomes legal, the prices will go down. When the prices go down, people are going to continue to buy the same amount because of addiction, but total revenues or sales or the profit from this illegal drugs are going to shrink. When this shrinks, the criminals are not going to be interested in anymore. This is the ones who are actually favoring legalization. But on the other hand, lower prices may attract more consumers into the market. Therefore, this may not be a good idea as well. So this is the other side of the argument. Price elasticity of supply. So here we are going to learn the responsiveness of sellers to price changes. If the supply is elastic, price elastic, producers are responsive to price changes. So what does that mean? Let's understand from real life. If the price increases, then they are going to respond by increasing their quantity supply. And if you remember from law of supply, there is a positive relation. So when the price increases, quantity supplied increases as well. So that means if they are responsive, they are going to increase the quantity of more than the increase in price. If it's an inelastic supply, producers are not as responsive to price changes. Prices increase, but because of maybe production capacity problems, they cannot increase the supply too much. So the formula is the same: percentage change in quantity supplied instead of quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price of product. And the interpretation is the same. If elasticity is greater than 1 supply is elastic, equal to 1 supply is unit elastic, less than 1 supply is inelastic. And we have extreme cases. If elasticity is 0, supply is perfectly inelastic. So time is primary determinant of elasticity of supply, and time periods considered as immediate market periods, short run and long run. Actually, in the short run, it's very hard for a producer to change the capacity of production, so they might be inelastic, they may not be responsive to changes in price. But as the time passes, you're going to wrap up production, you will find new resources, you will find ways of producing more, and therefore you are more elastic in the long run. Here is an example of perfectly inelastic supply. How do we know? It's because it's totally steep, okay? And this is the immediate market reaction. If something happens, let's say some product becomes very popular and the demand increases, therefore prices are rising. Why? Because the immediate reaction, maybe it's not easy to increase the production capacity immediately. Therefore, supply is perfectly inelastic in the very, very short time. And then as the time passes, supply becomes more elastic and becoming flatter. The reason is that because you will find new ways of producing goods, new capacities, new resources, and therefore an increase in the price, you started to increase the quantity. You see, in the previous case, price was increasing but no change in quantity supplied to the market, but now we have a change in quantity supply. And in the long run, supply becomes more flatter. As you see, demand increases and prices are rising in the market. Immediately, firms or suppliers react. I mean, when I say immediately, in the long run, they can change many things. So therefore, they are going to be more responsive to price changes. So here is one example of application of elasticity of supply. Antiques and other non-reproducible commodities have an inelastic supply. For one-of-a-kind antiques, the supply is perfectly inelastic. This makes their prices highly susceptible to fluctuations in demand. The more inelastic the supply, the greater the change in price when demand changes. Reproductions have a much more elastic supply, so the prices tend to remain lower even when there is an increase in demand. And gold prices are volatile because the supply of gold is highly inelastic, and unstable demand from speculation causes price to fluctuate significantly. And we have additional elasticities, as I said before. One of them is the cross-price elasticity. So what is cross-price elasticity? You are manager for Coca-Cola, Coke, okay, and you want to understand how responsive your buyers to a change in the price of a competitive brand. So let's say Pepsi, and you want to understand how much they buy or less, okay, Coke, depending on the change of a price of another good. That's why it's called cross-price elasticity. It's not the price of Coke, it's the price of alternative brand, and you want to understand how much the quantity for your product is changing. So it is percentage change in quantity demanded for product X, let's say it's the Coca-Cola, and you want to understand their responsiveness to a change in price of Pepsi. That's the cross-price elasticity. And cross-price elasticity measures responsiveness of purchases of one good to a change in the price of another good. And this time, the sign is important for cross-price elasticity. If you find a positive sign, then it's a substitute good. And if you find a negative sign for elasticity, it's a complementary goods. And independent goods, if elasticity is 0 or near 0. So let's talk about application of cross-price elasticity. Companies can use cross-price elasticity to determine whether rising the price of one of their products will affect sales of another of their products. And government also can use it to determine whether to allow a proposed merger of two companies or not. If there is a high cross-price elasticity between two companies' products, the government will likely not allow the merger, because if there is a high cross-price elasticity, then these two companies are substitutes. So if you let them merge, then there will be less competition in the market. So this chart demonstrates the cross-price elasticity of demand between education spending and increases in the price of foods among selected nations. If you carefully review the chart, you will find out that the amount by which education spending falls when food prices go up is higher in lower income countries than in high income countries. And the last elasticity is the income elasticity of demand. And here again we have the percentage change in quantity demanded, but this time denominator is different, percentage change in income. So you want to measure how responsive your consumers to a change in their income and how much buy more or less depending on a change in income. And measures responsiveness of buyers to changes in their income. And again, the sign is important here. If you find a positive sign, the two goods are normal. If you find a negative sign, the two goods are inferior. And high income elasticity is most affected by a recession. Low or negative income elasticity is not affected that much by a recession. So what is recession? Recession is the period of high unemployment. That means people are losing their jobs. If you find out high income elasticities, that means during the recessions your sales are going to go down because our people are sensitive to a change in income to buy your product or not. And lower negative income elasticities implies that your product sales are not affected by a recession. So let's summarize what we have learned. Cross-price elasticity, if it's positive, these two goods are substitute. If it's negative, these two goods are complement. So what does that mean? If it's positive, quantity demanded of W changes in the same direction as change in price of Z. If it's negative, quantity demanded of X changes in opposite direction from change in price of Y. Income elasticity can be positive or negative. If it's positive, the two goods are normal or superior. Negative, the two goods are inferior. And finally, we can talk about elasticity and pricing power on a case, why different consumers pay different prices. Some firms have market power or pricing power that allows them to set their product at prices that are in their best interest. For some goods and services, firms may find it advantageous to determine differences in price elasticity of demand and then charge different prices to different buyers. Business air travelers have a more inelastic demand for air travel, so they are charged higher prices since they will pay it. Families are sensitive to prices, so firms will charge lower prices for children as a result of the more elastic demand. Students from low-income households are offered assistance with paying for college since they have a higher price elasticity of demand. Students from higher income households will pay full price for their education unless they receive some type of merit-based scholarship. So that's all about this chapter. I hope this video is helping you understand the elasticity. Thank you.